So today we'll be studying the scapular area, and in the scapular area there are scapulohumeral muscles. The main muscle is the deltoid. Deltoid will be extending anteriorly, something like my hand. It starts from the clavicle lateral 1/3 anteriorly and from the lateral border of acromion and superior border of the spine of the scapula, and it goes down like this and gets inserted on the humerus. So when it contracts, it causes the abduction of the shoulder joint. This is how the deltoid works, and below which there is another small muscle called supraspinatus. It also causes the abduction of the shoulder joint. Anteriorly, there is a muscle called subscapularis. It will cause adduction and medial rotation. And posteriorly, there are two muscles, teres minor and the posteriorly there are this infraspinatus muscle and the teres minor muscle. So they will cause lateral rotation. Okay, they will cause lateral rotation. With that small orientation about the scapular region, we'll start studying the origin and insertion of the muscles of the scapular region.
So when we are looking from above, okay, when we are looking from above, we are looking from above the shoulder. So imagine you are standing above a person or looking from the top of a person, and then what you see is his clavicle is in the lateral 1/3, the clavicle is concave, and medial 2/3, the clavicle is convex. Okay, so this is how you see the clavicle of a person. Okay, this lateral 1/3, all of us know, articulates with the acromion. And the acromion is like this. It has a medial border, it has a lateral border. So to give orientation to this diagram, I should draw that this is anterior, this is posterior, this is lateral, and this is medial. You are looking from the top, so you see the clavicle like this. And then you see the acromion, and then you see the spine. So this is the spine of the scapula. This is the acromion of the scapula. This is the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle. This is the medial 2/3 of the clavicle. Okay, so this is the clavicle. So now the sites of origin of deltoid. The deltoid takes its origin from the anterior border, of the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle. Okay, then it takes origin from the lateral border of acromion. Okay, so these are the middle fibers. These are called as the middle fibers. These are the anterior fibers. And then there are posterior fibers from the lower border of the spine of scapula. So these are posterior fibers. Okay, these are acromial or middle fibers. These are anterior fibers, and these are posterior fibers. So there are three sites of origin of deltoid. Three sites of origin of deltoid muscle. From the medial anterior border of the lateral 1/3, anterior border of the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle. This is lateral 1/3 of the clavicle. Okay, so anterior fibers are from lateral 1/3 of clavicle, anterior border. Okay, anterior border, lateral 1/3. So these are the anterior fibers. Middle fibers are from lateral border of acromion, and posterior fibers are from lower border of spine of scapula. You are looking from the top. Exactly opposite was the origin, the insertion of trapezius. posterior border of the lateral one-third of clavicle, medial border of the acromion, and superior border of the spine of scapula. This is the insertion of trapezius. And origin of deltoid is like this. And this huge muscle takes its origin from here and goes down. Now I cannot show you three-dimensionally. Is going down and getting inserted on the deltoid tuberosity of the humerus. Now the middle fibers, they give septae like this. They give septae like this, and therefore this type of muscle is called as multi-pinnate muscle. Multi-pinnate muscle. This type of muscle is called as multi-pinnate muscle. So these are the posterior fibers. These are the anterior fibers. The middle fibers are also called, they arise from the lateral border of acromion, so they are called as acromial fibers. Injections are given in this muscle. In this deltoid muscle, injections are given. The nerve supply of deltoid is axillary nerve, which is a branch of posterior cord. To the branch of posterior cord of brachial plexus. Okay, this axillary nerve has a root value of C5, C6. Arises from cervical fifth and cervical sixth. Okay. Now the actions. Actions of the deltoid. Anterior fibers have different type of actions. Middle acromial fibers have different actions, and posterior fibers are different. Anterior fibers will cause flexion of the shoulder joint and medial rotation. Posterior fibers behind will cause extension of the shoulder joint, extension of shoulder, and lateral rotation. And middle acromial fibers will cause abduction. I showed you initially how it will cause abduction. It is attached here. So when it contracts, it brings about abduction. The shoulder will move like this. And you know the axillary nerve which supplies it, it is lying in the upper part. It is lying in the upper part. So injections are always to be given in the lower part here. If we give injection in the upper part, this is called as a tail of the deltoid, where it is becoming tapering. It's a delta shape. You can appreciate the delta shape. Okay, injections are given here. If injections are given here, that can damage the axillary nerve, and the person may not be able to abduct the shoulder joint. His hands will become like Sholay Ka Thakur, who had lost his hands. So instead, Gabbar Singh, if he would have known anatomy, he could have just given injection at this point and paralyzed the axillary nerve. It is as good as losing the hand, because now the hand cannot be abducted, and without abduction, one cannot do any action. Okay, and applied anatomy is injections are given in deltoid. Okay, injections are given, intramuscular injection, IM injections are given in deltoid. In exam, they ask what are the various structures under deltoid. So these three bones are under deltoid, shoulder joint. What are structures under deltoid? Sometimes they ask like this. So the structures under deltoid is the lateral one-third of the clavicle. Lateral one-third of the clavicle. There is acromion. Then there is the spine of the scapula. There is the shoulder joint, right? And there are these muscles. Supraspinatus, which we are going to study now. Supraspinatus. Then there is subscapularis. There is the infraspinatus, and there is minor muscle. Infraspinatus, and there is minor. So we need to study the scapula. When we study the scapula from the anterior aspect, the scapula, when we look from the anterior aspect, the scapula looks like this. And the anterior aspect along the medial border is insertion of serratus anterior muscle. Serratus anterior muscle, and the major portion lower down here is subscapularis. So this is how anteriorly there are two muscles attached to the scapula. When we look scapula from the posterior aspect, same scapula from the posterior aspect, always remember this vertical border is the medial border. Okay, and this side is the lateral side. On the lateral side, there is a glenoid cavity where the humerus forms the shoulder joint. Okay, now here this is the medial border and this is the lateral border. And here we know there is the spine of the scapula which turns like this from acromion. Okay, so this spine divides the scapula into supraspinous fossa and infraspinous fossa. So the supraspinatus muscle is here, and the infraspinatus muscle is here. Supraspinatus here and infraspinatus here. Supraspinatus. Supra means above. Above the spine there is a muscle, supraspinatus, on the posterior surface of scapula. We are looking the scapula from behind. So supraspinatus in. And on the medial border, we have already studied in the last session. There is levator scapulae, there is rhomboidus minor, there is rhomboidus major, and here at the lower angle is latissimus dorsi. Latissimus dorsi. Along the lateral border, there are these muscles. Okay, and their names are teres minor and teres major. Okay, there are these two muscles, teres minor and teres major. So the muscle here on the top is teres minor and below is major. So rhomboidus in rhomboidus also, minor was above, major was below. Here also minor was above, major. Okay, so all these muscles, they go for the insertion on the humerus. So now I'll draw the other side scapula over here. So now I'm drawing the posterior surface of scapula, the दूसरे side. Okay. Wherever I'll be drawing the spine means posterior. Now in this case, here is the medial border. So all these muscles will be here, right? Levator scapulae, rhomboidus minor, rhomboidus major, latissimus dorsi. They will be here. And the supraspinatus will be here, infraspinatus will be here, the teres minor will be here, teres major will be here. Okay. Here is the glenoid cavity. So this side is lateral, this side is medial. In this diagram, this was medial, this was lateral. So this is one scapula of one side. This is the anterior view. This is the scapula of the other side. Basically, what I have drawn here is the scapula of the left side. Now I am drawn the scapula of the right side. Now this is the humerus. All these muscles, they go for their insertion on the humerus. And from the humerus also there is one muscle which is coming, called as the triceps. Seps means head. Biceps means a muscle which has two heads. Triceps means muscle which has three heads. Okay. So now, if you see this arrangement, this muscle is teres minor. This muscle is teres major. This muscle is the long head of triceps. Long head of triceps. With this, what has happened is, there we can see some spaces now. We can see some spaces. This space is called as this space is called as quadrangular space. This space is called as upper triangular space. Upper triangular space. And this space is called as lower triangular space. Okay. Because of teres minor, teres major getting inserted on the humerus, and the triceps getting inserted on the scapula, the infraglenoid. This is glenoid, the infraglenoid tubercle of scapula. There are three spaces created. These are called as the intramuscular spaces of the shoulder region. Upper triangular. This is actually, it looks like a triangle, but the origins are like this. Upper triangular, lower triangular, and quadrangular.
Yes.
So when we are told to tell the boundaries of the triangular spaces, now let us talk about the boundaries of upper triangular spaces. Superiorly is teres minor. Inferiorly is teres major. Laterally is long head of triceps. Long head of triceps. The boundaries of the lower triangular space. Superiorly is teres major. Superiorly teres major. Medially long head of triceps. Medial. Laterally shaft of humerus. Laterally shaft of humerus. So superiorly teres major, medially long head of triceps, laterally shaft of humerus. Now let us talk about the boundaries of quadrangular space. Superiorly teres minor. Inferiorly teres medially long head of triceps. Long head of triceps. Laterally the humerus, shaft of humerus. Rather, it is more of neck of humerus, shaft of humerus. With that, let us study the contents. Let us study the contents of the spaces. Content of this space is nothing. There is one artery. Okay, there is just a single artery which is piercing the muscle which is forming the boundary. This name of that artery is circumflex scapular artery. Circumflex scapular artery. So upper triangular space, rather there is no content as such. There is circumflex scapular artery, which is, kind of interrupting the origin of teres minor. The upper triangular space. In the upper triangular space, there is axillary nerve. Axillary nerve along with posterior circumflex humeral artery. Posterior circumflex humeral artery. Okay, axillary nerve and posterior circumflex humeral artery. While in the lower triangular space, so upper triangular, in the quadrangular space and lower triangular space, there are important contents. Here there is axillary nerve along with posterior circumflex humeral artery. And here there is the radial nerve in the lower triangular space along with profunda brachii artery. Radial nerve and profunda brachii artery. The content of upper triangular space is circumflex scapular artery. Content of quadrangular space is axillary nerve with posterior circumflex humeral artery. Content of lower triangular space is radial nerve with profunda brachii artery. Okay, so these are the spaces, specific spaces, intermuscular spaces in the shoulder region, and each space has a content, each space has a boundary. So you should be able to tell the boundary. Upper triangular is bounded by teres minor above, teres major below, medially by, laterally by long head of triceps. Quadrangular space, teres minor above, teres major below, medially is triceps long head, laterally is humerus. Content is axillary nerve and posterior circumflex humeral artery. Lower triangular space above is teres major, medially is triceps long head, laterally is humerus. Content is radial nerve and profunda brachii artery. Now you are looking at the humeral head from the top, and then anteriorly this is anterior, this is medial, this is lateral, this is posterior. So this is the lesser tubercle of the humerus. When you take the humerus in the hand, after the head there is a lesser tubercle and then there is a greater tubercle. So this whole thing is greater tubercle. Okay. On this lesser tubercle is inserted subscapularis muscle. Subscapularis. And on greater tubercle there are three impressions. On one impression is inserted supraspinatus. Next impression is infraspinatus, and posterior most and lowermost impression is teres minor. So this we have already seen the origins of this muscle, right? We have seen the origins from here. The supraspinatus is above the spine, infraspinatus is here, teres minor is on the lateral border, teres major is on the lateral border. So now we know that supraspinatus was then inserted on this impression, infraspinatus posteriorly here, and teres minor here. Teres minor here. Teres major is going anterior. So when we look from the humerus on the anterior aspect, this is the head, the lesser tubercle and greater tubercle. And between the lesser and greater tubercle, there is a space called as intertubercular sulcus. This is on the humerus. Between the lesser tubercle and greater tubercle is intertubercular sulcus, where three muscles are inserted. Pectoralis major laterally, teres major medially, and latissimus dorsi in between teres major and minor. Latissimus dorsi is between, so that is called as lady between two knees. Okay, so when you take humerus in hand, you will see the intertubercular sulcus. So there is pectoralis major inserted in the lateral part of the sulcus. There is major inserted on the medial part. Two majors, and lady latissimus dorsi is in between the two majors. So these are the insertions of these muscles. Now, if you see these four muscles, subscapularis, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor, literally, if this is the shoulder joint, one muscle is here, anterior. One muscle is there, superior. And there are two muscles posterior. So this is subscapularis. This is supraspinatus. This is infraspinatus. This is teres minor. So they blend with the capsule. They blend with the capsule of the shoulder joint to form what is called as rotator cuff. That is called as rotator cuff or musculotendinous cuff. The rotator cuff or musculotendinous cuff. So to orient you, on top of all of this will be deltoid, like this. This will be deltoid. If I remove the deltoid, then I see subscapular is coming from the top, subpuraspinatus going inserted like this, infraspinatus coming from the scapula, teres minor coming and getting inserted. And as they're getting inserted, they blend with the capsule of the shoulder joint. So one muscle supports the shoulder joint anteriorly, another muscle supports it superiorly, two muscles support it posteriorly. In short, if this is the humerus, supraspinatus supports it subcapillary supports it anteriorly, supraspinatus supports it superiorly, infraspinatus posteriorly, and teres major posteriorly. So these four muscles, teres minor, infraspinatus, supraspinatus, subscapularis on that, they kind of hold tightly. They hold the head of the humerus tightly in the shoulder joint, and they stabilize the shoulder joint anteriorly, superiorly, and I have written inferiorly by a mistake, posterior. Anteriorly, posteriorly, and superior. Okay, and so that's why the dislocation of the shoulder joint is common on inferior aspect, because inferiorly the shoulder joint does not have any support. Okay, so this is called as rotator cuff or musculotendinous cuff. Okay, the nerve supply. The nerve supply of these muscles. Deltoid is by axillary nerve. Axillary nerve also supplies teres minor. Teres major is supplied by the subscapular nerve. Okay. Teres major is supplied by the lower subscapular nerve. Okay. Supraspinatus and infraspinatus. Supraspinatus and infraspinatus, they are supplied by the supraspinatus by suprascapular nerve and infraspinatus by the lower the infraspinatus is supplied also by the suprascapular nerve. So both the supraspinatus and infraspinatus, they are supplied by the suprascapular nerve. The root value of the suprascapular nerve is C5, C6. C5, C6. Now one more muscle, subscapularis. Subscapularis. This is the one which is supplied by upper and lower subscapular nerve. Upper and lower subscapular nerve. So if you remember the brachial plexus, in the brachial plexus there was posterior cord. From the posterior cord, axillary nerve was arising, C5, C6. The same axillary nerve supplies teres minor, C5, C6. So basically, if you see, there are 6 muscles here. There are 6 muscles here, out of which deltoid and teres minor have same supply, axillary. Subscapularis and teres major have same supply. Upper and lower subscapular, teres major by lower subscapular. And supraspinatus, infraspinatus have same nerve supply. The suprascapular nerve, okay, which is from C5, C6. Suprascapular nerve is a branch of the upper trunk. Okay, so for the sake of the nerve supply, let us put them under 3 nerves. Axillary nerve supplies deltoid and teres minor. Suprascapular nerve supplies supraspinatus and infraspinatus. And upper and lower subscapular nerve, it supplies subscapularis. They are branches of the posterior cord. This is axillary nerve is also branch of posterior cord. C5, C6. C5, C6. This also C5, C6. All these muscles are supplied by nerves with root value C5, C6. These are branches of posterior cord, upper and lower subscapular and axillary. And suprascapular nerve is a branch of upper trunk, along with nerve to subclavius. Upper trunk of brachial plexus. So subscapularis and teres major. So if you remember, if this it like this, that both supraspinatus and infraspinatus supplied by suprascapular nerve, subscapularis and teres major by the upper and lower subscapular nerves, deltoid and teres minor by. Okay. What are their actions? Deltoid, we already studied. Abduction of shoulder joint. Abduction of shoulder joint more from 0 to 90 degrees. Supraspinatus, again abduction from 0 to 90, but some say that it initiates the abductions. There are still some anatomies we feel that supraspinatus is responsible for 0 to 15 degrees. Supraspinatus. Now supraspinatus is on the top, right? We look from the side, the supraspinatus is going like this. Okay, coming from the scapula and getting inserted. So it will cause abduction. While infraspinatus is behind. Okay, the teres minor is behind. Okay, infraspinatus, teres minor is behind. So infraspinatus and teres minor, they will cause lateral rotation. Lateral rotation of shoulder joint. Okay. So teres minor will cause lateral rotation, while teres major will cause medial rotation because it is inserted anterior. Subscapularis will also cause medial rotation. Subscapularis will also cause medial rotation. Okay. Medial rotation and adduction. Medial rotation and adduction. So if you see nerve supply wise also, subscapularis and teres major have same nerve supply, upper and lower subscapular. They will have same action, medial rotation and adduction. Same nerve supply. Okay. While supraspinatus causes the abduction, infraspinatus causes lateral rotation. So these two, if you see the group, how to remember, it is little difficult to remember the action, but that's why I'm explaining to you again and again. Deltoid, so these two groups, if you see, one muscle causes abduction, other muscle causes lateral rotation. So of the 6 muscles, they are divided into 3 groups as per nerve supply. Upper and lower subscapular nerve supplies subscapularis and teres major. Both of them are adductors. Both of them are adductors and medial rotators of the shoulder joint. Now the remaining 2 groups, axillary nerve supplying deltoid and teres minor, one is abductor, one is lateral rotator. Suprascapular nerve supplying supraspinatus, infraspinatus, one is abductor, other is lateral. This is how you remember the scapulo-humeral muscles, their origin, their insertion, their nerve supply, and their action. Now again, I'll go fast as regards the origin of deltoid is concerned. Deltoid takes origin from the lateral 1/3 of the anterior border of the scapula, in the lateral 1/3, from the lateral border of acromion and superior border, the inferior border of the spine of scapula gets inserted on the deltoid tubercle of the humerus. Teres major and minor, their origins are from the lateral border of the scapula. We have studied from the lateral border, teres minor and teres major, the take origin. Minor gets inserted on the posterior and inferior impression on the greater tubercle. Major gets inserted on the intertubercular sulcus, lady between 2 majors. So it is on the anterior. Supraspinatus gets inserted, takes origin from the supraspinous fossa. When we look at the scapula from the posterior aspect, there is a spine. Above the spine is supraspinous fossa, from where supraspinatus takes origin. Infraspinatus takes origin from here. Supraspinatus goes and gets inserted on the uppermost impression of the greater tubercle. Infraspinatus gets inserted on the middle impression of the greater tubercle. Okay. Subscapularis is from the anterior surface of the scapula. Okay. Anterior surface of the scapula. All majority of these muscles are taking origin from the posterior surface. This is from the anterior surface of the scapula, and this gets inserted on the lesser tubercle of the humerus. This gets inserted on the lesser tubercle of the humerus. Okay. And so therefore 2 muscles of these groups are getting inserted on the anterior surface, teres major and subscapularis. And because they are getting inserted on the anterior surface, they will cause action called as the medial rotation and adduction. Okay. After that, I'll switch this camera to myself so that I can explain you the actions properly.
So the deltoid muscle, which we studied today, is like this, and therefore it causes the abduction of the shoulder from 0 to 90. While the subscapularis muscle, which is from the anterior surface of scapula, it will be coming from behind and getting inserted on the lesser tubercle. So because it is coming from behind and getting inserted on lesser tubercle, it will cause adduction and medial rotation. Okay. While infraspinatus and teres minor will be behind like this. They will be behind. So whenever they contract from behind, they will cause lateral rotation. So lateral rotation of the humerus. Both of them, like my 2 fingers here, will be the infraspinatus getting inserted here and teres minor here. So when they contract, they are from behind, so they cause lateral rotation of the shoulder. When supraspinatus is here, supraspinatus will cause the like deltoid overhead abduction. So exactly like my finger, supraspinatus getting inserted at this point. So whichever muscle gets inserted here causes abduction. Whichever muscles get inserted here, the subscapularis and teres major, they are on the anterior surface. So when they contract, they'll cause medial rotation. Okay. So they'll cause medial rotation. Muscles getting inserted on the back, they'll cause lateral rotation. So two muscles getting inserted on the back, infraspinatus and teres minor, they will cause lateral rotation. Two muscles getting inserted in the front, subscapularis and teres major, they'll cause medial rotation and adduction. Two muscles like this, the supraspinatus and deltoid, causing overhead abduction from 0 to 90. Of course, deltoid has anterior fibers also that will cause medial rotation and flexion. And there are posterior fibers of deltoid which will cause lateral rotation and extension. And middle fibers, which are also called acromial fibers, they will cause the overhead abduction. The nerve supply of deltoid and teres minor is same. One is abductor, one is lateral rotator. The nerve supply is axillary nerve. The nerve supply of the subscapularis and teres major is same. One is, both of them are the medial rotator and adductors. And the nerve supply of the supraspinatus and infraspinatus is same. The suprascapular nerve as we studied. And one of them is abductor, now other is the lateral rotator. With that, we stop today. Thank you so much.